We're actually super ahead of schedule, so I'm going to wait until I start pressing play. Oh, and I think one more tech thing for everyone is to fully enjoy the screening, we'll just need to remind ourselves to turn off our videos. I'm not sure how it's showing up on everyone else's screen, but I think on the live stream, if everyone's videos are off, the live stream will only show what's being shared.
That's helpful. What about during the Q&A? Do you want, I mean, I imagine, do you want everyone to have their videos on?
Oh, for the Q&A, all the moderators and panelists.
Okay.
If you all consent to it, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the live stream is going, but we could chill. No one's here yet. I'm going to start the webinar right at 2, so.
機睇到嘅，睇波啊，係啊，用我裝咗嘅喎。
你唔用啫，但係
用咩唔用？我成日喺上面睇啊，聽埋。
嗱媽咪。
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm just going to wait until the ASL interpreter gets on here too. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Diana, and I am tuning in from Chochenyo Ohlone Land. I work for both the Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Center and the Asian American Women Artists Association, both of which are presenting organizations of the exhibition Sowing Agency, located at SoMa Cultural Center on Yelamu Ramaytush Ohlone territory. We hope you've been able to visit the show in person or online and were able to witness the video we just played. I'm going to bring up the artist, Trisha, in just a moment to say a few words about it. But before we do that, we wanted to point to a few resources available today. Automatic live captions are available if you need access to them. Just at the bottom of your Zoom window, you can press the CC button and press Show Captions. All of the films you are about to see in today's program are also all closed captioned. We are also happy to have Annie here to provide ASL interpretation today, and we'll make sure her video is pinned next to our speakers for the day as well. If you are joining us on YouTube and are in need of ASL interpretation, we recommend joining us through the Zoom, which you can access through the Eventbrite that you registered on. If you have any questions you'd like to ask any of the filmmakers, there will be a Q&A at the end as well. So feel free to drop them in the Q&A button, in the live chat on the YouTube, or in the chat in the Zoom, and we can gladly share them during our Q&A at that point. But without further ado, I'd like to bring up Trisha Rainwater Tutwiler, artist of the video we just saw, which has also been playing on loop at the exhibition all month long. So we're excited to hear Trisha say a few words about it. Without further ado, Trisha.
Hi, hello, halito, sahojifoya, Trisha Rainwater Tutwiler. Hello, my name is Trisha Rainwater Tutwiler. I'm speaking to you today from Ohlone Land in San Francisco. Thank you to Lisa and Diana for asking me to come and speak a bit about my film and my project, APICC Medicine Tree, a film performance and installation. So before I start, I wanted to give a content warning for brief mentions of abuse, violence, and trauma, specifically violence and trauma against Indigenous women, Two-Spirits, and girls. I am an indigiqueer installation artist and self-portrait photographer who was raised in the Central Valley, as well as San Francisco. My father is Choctaw and my mother was white. My background and the way I was raised in and out of my culture has highly impacted how I create works of art and communicate my visions to the world. I'm excited to talk to you today about my installation, APICC Tree or Medicine Tree, which includes the video you watched as you entered the Zoom today. The word APICC is a Choctaw word for medicine tree, for medicine. Hold on, I lost my place. So the word APICC is a Choctaw word for medicine and a pull to find healing through traditional ways taught to me as a child. The idea for APICC, like many other things, came to me in a dream. And when I had the dream, I felt afraid to lean into its vision, though I believed in its power. I envisioned myself interacting with the parts of the imagined piece, and then I felt torn over what it would mean or how it would look, but I knew I needed to make it. While I created APICC, I was drawn back to memories of myself as a child making prayer ties with elders in my family. 8 years ago now, for an installation in an art exhibit named The Bones of Our Ancestors, I invited community members to collaborate with me and make their own prayer ties, starting with a small pile in the middle of the installation. Ties were added until they were falling off the platform that had been made to hold them. Over 1,000 prayer ties were created. literally holding people's prayers and intentions. At the time, I had begun my own long journey of acknowledging and reckoning with my trauma as a childhood abuse survivor. My therapist often encouraged me to turn back to traditional ways, ceremony, and each time he suggested I would cry. My reclamation of my own traditions has been a long journey, but a really important one. As a personal ceremony, I created this body of work. The film portion of the piece was shot in Golden Gate Park with trees I had previously interacted with throughout my self-portrait work. I shot in Golden Gate Park on 2 separate occasions for a quiche. The first day with my partner helping me to film and make photographs. The videos were filmed on my iPhone in single takes. When the sound is on, you can hear the camera click over and over again. And more than once I flinch. As people walk by, I stop and I become self-conscious and make eye contact. Though I knowingly put myself in a place to be viewed as I worked, I was surprised at the ways I felt vulnerable during its making. As a self-portrait photographer, I often turn inward in front of the camera, allowing my emotions to pour out and be witnessed in photo form. But the differences with video were stark. The second time I arrived at Golden Gate Park, it was packed with people partying. I hesitated and thought about leaving, but I was dedicated to getting the best photograph. And so I walked through the crowds down a path until I found a small spot to set up my tripod and start shooting. This is where I took the photograph that is part of my installation. I was anxious, but firm in my decision to shoot, even with it being crowded, and I found the perfect spot to do so. All of my work aims to be a pathway to healing, and this work is one and the same. My original prayer ties made for the small pile contained shredded pictures of my abusers, and as I placed them in the ties, I imagined what healing would look like for myself. I imagined myself being released from shame and scars. My thoughts and work around climate justice really tie into the ongoing violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits. I believe that our land cannot heal if we are also not tending to our personal wounds and rising up against the violence being inflicted upon our communities daily. Ceremonies were stolen from Indigenous peoples, and it's our responsibility to reclaim and practice them whenever we can. I hope that in my doing so, I continue to find healing and strength. And Yukoke, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Trisha, and thank you so much for sharing your story. As I mentioned before, this film screening is co-presented by both AAWAA and APICC. But before we go into that, when planning a show about environmental justice, we would all be remiss if we did not recognize the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of the land we're residing on and benefiting from right now. A lot of you know that we are mostly an Asian American and Asian American woman-led organization. So we acknowledge our ancestors as immigrants and uninvited guests on this stolen land, and the great debt we owe from benefiting off the genocide waged against the Ohlone people. We want to name and honor the lives and agency of Native peoples who continue to steward the histories and futures of these places. So with that, we are also so grateful and honored to have Canyon Coyote Woman Sayers Roots in community with us today to open up this program and ceremony and offer a land acknowledgement. Thank you, Canyon.
Mishmin Tuhis, good day. Conrakat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots. I am so honored to be in this digital space with everyone, and I want to be sure that I could do us all respect in hoping I can gather a couple people. So this event if we were gathered in person, we would be probably in the East Bay, right? Just making sure, because you called in from Ramaytush territory as well.
Yes, East Bay and Ramaytush territory. So Chochenyo and Ramaytush, yeah.
All right. So for those of you who are joining us from the East Bay, we acknowledge Huchin. Huchin is the name of the village of this territory, and the first language of the land is Chochenyo. And if we're over in SF territory, I like to say we are in Yolamu. And Yolamu is the first village name of the city, San Francisco. And the first language from San Francisco down towards San Mateo is Ramaytush. So I invite you to say these words to yourself. Say Huchin, Chochenyo, Yalamu, Ramaytush. These are the indigenous languages and the names of these lands. And there is a beautiful, rich, diverse history from pre-contact, or how the indigenous communities tended and stewarded these lands since time immemorial, to how we came to be here. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be in community with all of you. And it's important that we honor truth and history. And there are layers of history that we haven't been given a full chance to navigate. So I encourage you to take that step to find all the layers to how we came to be where we are. I come from a matrilineal society. I come from Indian Canyon, daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers. And Indian Canyon is the only federally recognized Indian country between Sonoma and Santa Barbara along central coastal California. And as it got to my mother, it was in the 80s that she realized, or she came to get a deeper understanding, that the first time the Native American had the right to practice their religion freely was 1978. Now, it's really important we recognize that, because a lot of the land acknowledgements that I've presented to the greater community is 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And it's just, hi, Canyon, can you acknowledge your community or how you present yourself? And can you offer a bit of a prayer? And so I want to remind you that with these prayers and with this energy and with the reason why I'm given these opportunities to speak in front of you is to honor the layers of truth and history and how we came to be here in these times. And also honor the past to shape the future. And that is both the wisdom and knowledge of our elders and our ancestors, and also some negative occurrences that we want to make sure we don't repeat. And so I invite you, and I want to remind you that I, as an Indigenous person of these territories, am very rooted and connected. I also want to voice that when you honor your ancestors and your ancestors' ancestors, you come from Indigenous lineages, the land that your ancestors have always come from. And we are all AAWAA, people of this land. And so to honor Indigenous protocol is by acknowledging the history and the layers and the first stewards of these lands, the Indigenous peoples, and then how are we in community together as AAWAA? That's in the Mutsun language, further south of here. Aloni is the greater term, and it's a misnomer that my ancestors wouldn't know. And same as Kostanoan. But I want to come here and present in this circle that, coming from a matrilineal society, my mother and my grandmother have always taught me that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. And so us coming together in community, to me, that's a form of ceremony. Us sharing stories and presenting our arts and our hearts and communicating and bonding with all of our community. I'm trying to find a way to say beyond human to human contact. I'm talking about our kinship to nature, our connection to the earth. So coming from a matrilineal society, we offer songs and prayers and ritual. And so I want to offer a song for the pollinators, hummingbird. In the Mutsun language, hummingbird is humunya. And if you're from Monterey, in the Rumsian language, it's humaya. And so there's a little song that I learned from my Rumsian cousins, and I'm going to use it in my language, humunya. And this is a song to hummingbird, being the pollinators, the bringer of the fire, and one of the community members who brought life to humans. So hummingbird, and I'm going to use my regalia because we as Native peoples, we don't wear costumes. This is a little hummingbird song. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, hu. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, hu. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, hu. And I invite you all to say, oh, oh, oh.
Oh.
I invite you. And so I'm just honored to be here. I'm so happy to see these communities coming together. And I barely recognize I was featured in one of them. So yay, cool beans. I just want to remind people that we can honor truth in history wherever we are and wherever we go. There are beautiful layers of history of how we came to be. And we need to just acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know. And when we acknowledge that there have been indigenous peoples tending and stewarding these lands since time immemorial, we need to recognize that the 1800s, the 1600s, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We're still in the teens of the hundreds, and Homo sapiens sapien has existed for 200,000 years. And so I want to remind you that indigenous cultures around the world have been tending and stewarding their lands, their communities, and their ways of life. Pre-colonization, but pre-outsiders coming in deeming it knows what's right. We need to stop that behavior. The Western settler colonial entitlement is from that colonial narrative and agenda. I want to remind you that there's beautiful layers of truth, honoring truth in history, recognizing we come from matriarchal societies or other communities, other governing structures. And remember that the narrative is not always presented fully, just like the sentence, Native American hunter-gatherer. It dismisses the first land stewards, the first land managers, the first scientists, the first doctors, the first ecologists, the first water masters, the stewards of the earth. We, as humans, we impact the land around us. So how are we being accountable to not only how our actions and words impact ourselves, our family, our community, the next 7 generations in the future? How are we being good ancestors in training? So I invite you, let us honor truth and history wherever we are. Learn about the indigenous peoples, but also learn about, hey, why is this city named the way it is? Hey, why is this going this way or that way? Let's look into why this came to be, because it plays in on how we navigate the world. So I encourage you to decolonize. I encourage you to re-indigenize your approaches towards, just like strategic steps to a better future. I'm so honored to be here with pollinators and educators and amazing, strong, beautiful beings. And so let us honor truth and history. Let us be in community together. Let us respect each other for our diverse perspectives and approaches. I'm just really, really happy. So I think I'm close to the time, right? I'm doing good on this whole Western settler colonial time. It's so hard to think that way, but I want to be respectful of the time and space and opportunities I've had the opportunity to have been given, and I'll take more space when I can, but I'll be around. And honor native land wherever you are. Every Zoom you go to, say, hey, what land are you on? Go to that map, check it out. You are amazing.
Thank you so much, Canyon. Thank you very much. I always get excited when you open up events for us, and we're very grateful to you and Trisha for opening the event today. So once again, this event is co-presented by APICC and AAWAA, both of which are very small, mostly volunteer-run nonprofits. AAWAA itself consists of 2 staff members, and we're dedicated to the recognition and visibility of Asian American women in the arts, but we also stand up for a number of things in terms of arts equity and social activism. So if you like what you see here today, we'd appreciate your support in helping us continue to put on programming just like this by either joining as a member donating or joining our newsletter at the link Jenny will paste in the chat just shortly. I also want to recognize all of our funders and sponsors, but we're getting to that moment of time where we want to get to the screening and show you all the films. So I'm just going to invite you to please take a look at the last link Jenny pasted in there in the chat, which has all of our logos and all of our funders represented. So thank you all for making this show happen. The other thing is Sowing Agency is also presented as part of the 24th Annual United States of Asian America Festival presented by APICC. And this festival has its own full calendar of artistic events. So even though this event is the closing event for the visual arts exhibition, the whole festival is happening through the end of June as an extended APA Heritage Month. So you can check out the festival at the calendar link in the chat as well. With that, it's my honor to pass the mic to our moderators for today. The first one being Sowing Agency curator Lisa to introduce the screening.
Hi, thank you. This has been really beautiful so far, and I feel really grateful that I just get to witness. My name is Lisa Pradhan. I'm the curator for the show. I wish we could physically be together. I'm joining from Huichin, and I'm grateful that we have the space to be together virtually and to watch these films together. I wanted to take a moment to thank you, Canyon, Trisha, Vanessa, Bronte, Sal, Nancy, Diana, and Turner for joining us today and weaving us into your stories. As we're closing the show, I think it's always a really lovely moment to think of reflection, and I just want to recognize the ways in which the show came from the desire to acknowledge the living impact of colonization on this land and to weave together an understanding of the ways environmental justice principles emerge in our communities and in all of its complexities. And I think when we really started the show, we really thought about it as like a living conversation. And so I hope that this continues to live, and as we move on to this next stage, I hope that the films we're watching today and that the show itself can help guide our collective healing, resilience, and liberation, and that we can learn in deeper and deeper ways how to really see each other and the contributions each of us bring. So I'm now going to pass the virtual mic, to my co-moderator, Turner from 18MR. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Turner, and I'm the social media organizer at 18 Million Rising. I am in Toronto on Dish with One Spoon Treaty Territory, which is land shared by the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee. 18MR is a national organization connecting the power of Asian America to digital organizing. We mobilize young Asian Americans to build community power, fight injustice, and create the future that we all deserve. We're super proud to be a co-organizer of tonight's event. So let's get it started.
O Malipo Chandrasak O Muson Sat Kumu Po Mung Ika Asun Pau Kumu Sun Sat Kumu O Rodki Pipan Koloi 91 เดือน 6
โอมยาแซงโอกมคนกุมุก้อนอุนีมยาตริโนนี่ก็อาปาร์คนอยากจ้อยเจียอาปาร์เจอุนีเจนูอาซีคนนู่นแหละจำขึ้นปาร์จำโปรปาร์นอมยาตปูกินหนอนตาอาก้อนน้องมุดยัดเลี้ยง
ซึ่งอีโรดเหตุผลที่อีโรดกี้ก็เนื่องจากว่าสงครามเวียดนามกันนี้เรื่องเซารันนี่แต่ตรวจอีกอันเนื้อซะนี่แบบมอร์เซตนะต้มน้ำมันเซารันอีกอันหนึ่งอีกกี่เป็น2 ปีที่3เกิดละเมิดอีเตยามซัมเมอร์นะอย่าส่งกันแย่ออนกันแย่ยอนอกกูโรงเรียนเสมอก็จกรถไปจูรเกลี้ยนะอย่าต้องงอซาบลิกอย่าหรืออย่าเปิดคนแย่ว่าอย่าเวรกายน้องตึงนี้น้องซาบ
มีจอดรถด้วยอยู่ ตะเท่ากากางก้าละอวยกาต้วยเลย ការរត់ត្រទីរំទងគាត់តាភីកតាអកគេទៅអូកាលវាពឿនល្មើចเพื่อนวุฒิเอ็ดมืออมปึงกำปะก็ม่อนเงินนั่นแหละโทษเราcứ nơปิดกระจกบ่เนอมื้อนี้เนาะเรามือสรันเอ็กซ์โพลนิสู้
โอ้กูดสมัครกูดนะเวียกไปแพนกี่แบบปี2004
ก็ยอการก็ยอพวกเกิดยอเพิ่นหลายปีแหละ
พวกนายทุนพวกเศรษฐีกันนี้เป็นต้นมาอีรับจ้างหนออันอิเตสมองเอ็ดนอเป็นเตอีนึกอันนี้ว่าคนทุกเนี่ยนึกไล่ลานคนนะคนถูกเปลี่ยนเมืองอเมริกาแล้วเอแพนองค์การที่จุดต่อสู้กันเพื่อคนถูกและการต่อสู้การเมืองเฉพาะเอแพน18องค์การรวมยอดนออัลโพพันเปอร์อีองค์การอีแล้วก็พูดสมัยอันน่ะยาแก้วกี่ชุดกิจนี้นอ5คนนอเรียกปฏิญาณรอแต่เปอร์อีนี่แหละตาอีกองผู้ซุ่มนี่นอซะเตจะเอากุยอันน่ะสิ้นมนจากอันน่ะรองจากโรงงานเตมันยำประชนแล้วนี่นอก็วินแท้อีประชนอีก็ปลอมนอนี่อีก็ปอนนอก็เพื่อนแท้อันอีเป็นแต่ใส่นี้คืออัลเปื้อนคืออัลอวยอัลเจออย่างเปลือกกี้แล้วก็อันสองก็คือประหยัดอันใจอีใจเอ็ดก็สำคัญเพื่ออีเยคนถูกเพราะเราไม่ต้นมาหลอดเตกี่แล้วอีจึงว่าต่อสู้เพื่อซึ่งแวดล้อมกันนี่เมื่ออีต้องการเมื่อก็ทางองค์การเราก็จะน้อมจะยิงจะจอยอีเป็นต้นการหยัดการมาการจุอันปราลคืออัปเตอร์นี่คือขมโกแหงอีแหงปุบตะเตะเลยซึ่งจุซึ่งห้านอีจุห้านอัลคาดอากาศที่สะอาดอีตัวส่วนนอนลดพรปเตอร์เนี่ย
เราอันเมื่อก็พร้อมอกพร้อมใจกูต่อสู้ประโยชน์อันเปื่อนนึงเลยอีกก็เปื่อนรู้
The scope of the problem and the solutions like renewable energy and the local things that we can do. And it's an opportunity to engage more youth, create more partnerships.
我叫潘海波，我是1929年1月15号出生的。很幸运，我与伟大的民权领袖马丁·路德·金是同年同月同一天的生日。我是1943年进入铁路43，一直工作到1990年，差不多接近50年，是做修理火车的技术工人。感受是很同情那些人，同情这些成天跟煤炭烟尘接触的这些那些人呢，都变成了黑脸，衣服都是黑的。这个不要紧，这是外表，可以洗得掉，洗到肺里头去了，让那个肺吸收了这些尘。那个煤矿工人呐，采石场采矿的工人呐，到了30-40岁、40-50岁都是吸肺病。那就是看到要死的，没法治的。我是1991年移民到奥克兰，就没有换过地方，一直在这里。所以后来我到了美国来了以后这个空气这么新鲜，我很高兴我这样人的寿命都会长一些。广大市民来讲，那是很重要。每一个城市都有一个常年的比较多的那个风向，叫做中国话来讲就是常年的季风。美国的地图我好像没有发现，中国好多地图上面有一个玫瑰图，就是画的像个5星8星一样的，它有一个箭头指到一个方向，这个是这个城市的常年季候风。附近的居民呢，长期吸这个粉尘对身体是很有害的。主要这个粉尘呢，吸到肺里去，因为煤炭有很多毒素的。有人来介绍我说这里有一个 亚太环保网络。我说他做什么的？他是搞环保节能。哎，好，我有兴趣的，所以我把我知道的，我跟议员们、跟我们 APICC 组织都讲。这样子的话呢，大家都爱护这个地球，爱护环境。见到破坏环境的应该反对，对吧？像我们反对煤炭运输就属于这个，让人类能够世世代代很幸福地生活下去。
A gun is made to kill. Its purpose is to take life. That's what it came to do. Shovels have many purposes. They can either dig up to bury things, or they can dig to plant life. We didn't know nothing about how to turn a gun into a shovel. We're not metal artists, but we had the capacity to imagine.
This week, we organized an incredible time for healing justice here for the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. Putting the finishing touches on our shovels. These are the handles that we made from guns that say "lead to life" on them. They're steel. A little quote from Bronte and I, which says, "As we decompose violence, may the earth again be free." The final few of these guys are going to be made tonight, but in a public ritual, in a big demonstration.
Thank you for being here, everybody.
I just want to share how this work comes into being. In 2013, a young man by the name of Xavier Arnold was shot and killed in Atlanta. And it brought in a lot of questions around how do we change environments impacted by trauma? How do we heal our cities that still have that energy caught and trapped? We're going to hear from some sacred guests who are here with us who have lost folks to gun violence. And these folks are also going to bring weapons into the fire to be transformed.
There's something about being a mother of a gun violence victim that just bonds you right away, and they are like my sisters because nobody knows the pain. Nobody understands the pain, and when I see them, I just feel like collapsing in their arms because I know they understand. I know they know what it's like to get that call that your son is never coming back. And so my son Robbie was 23 years old, and he was shot and killed several times by 4 men.
My son passed away. Right before he passed away, he told me that he was made of flesh, and that the flesh, it dissolves, it goes away, it goes back into the ground, but that our bodies are built of mass energy. And what does energy do? It can never be destroyed. It always returns.
Serotonin is the process when a seed germinates in fire. It invites the idea that in the middle of the most destructive act, when we think that all is lost, when fire is coming and raging through our landscapes, that actually, for some species, that is the moment they are born.
Last night, we finished our shovels made from guns. We did a ceremony where we made shovels from weapons. We're planting 16 fruit trees in just a moment. And we're also bringing in some of the soil we collected last week in service to Equal Justice Initiative's National Lynching Memorial in Montgomery. So we collected soil out in Roswell for Brother Mac Brown, who was lynched in 1936. And that soil is going to come in to bless these
fruit trees for us today with these alchemical tools.
In Led to Life, we are doing public participatory ceremonies where we get to pray through doing, pray through digging. And when we do that in community, when we do that together, that's what ceremony is.
Everything is possible to me in ceremony because you can metabolize grief, you can metabolize healing, you can metabolize learning because people are suddenly present and deciding we are gathering to shift something together.
Here's Xavier's ashes, and we're gonna take it as they're massaging the tree and the soil into the ground. We're gonna add Xavier's ashes into the soil. His energy will be going as a lifeline through the tree and coming out through the flowers and the buds, and that will radiate his energy back into the world. It is beautiful. Love you.
I'm tired of seeing Black children die, and I'm tired of seeing Black children not be able to be children and to not grow up.
If Black wellness is the most radical act against state violence, may we be so well, a reservoir of joy. May we resource ourselves so as to overflow, filling all places where joy has been stolen with laughter, health, and connection.
We have to convince people that trees are worth being alive, that people deserve to be nourished, that people deserve to be well. It shouldn't be a question, it shouldn't be a fight, it just should be what it is.
For the queer community, since we've been like working with everyone in the community, we needed to find spaces for you know
blow some steam.
Yeah.
On Halloween, after the hurricanes, there wasn't a curfew announced until that day. Everyone had plans to fuck it. It's Halloween after Maria. Let's just try to have fun, and then put on a curfew. Everyone was like, ugh. So I said, fuck it. Let's make a illegal party. No curfew. Just come. When we drop the pin, secret location. Look for the pin. Come and dance. No one messed it with us. It was beautiful. So I after that experience, I said, this is a real necessity. People enjoying themselves in a safe space after this, especially in my community. It's needed, so that's gonna be my goal. I said, why not attack one of the biggest problems here is that most housing and buildings in the city are abandoned and just unreachable because they're in hands of either banks or owners that don't want to do nothing. They don't want to do anything with the space, just sell it. The end of the year, we decided to have it the same way, announcing the space the same day, and we went in an abandoned hotel.
Taking over abandoned places.
It was our first Occupy party.
A part of what makes spaces like this really, really powerful and important is that they're made by community. And there's something really empowering and beautiful and sacred about being able to say, like, we existed in a time before there were institutions that we depended on, right? we were able to take care of our communities and survive so much, right? And we carry that resilience. And so how do we continue to create spaces where we know we're going to be okay, where we're going to do our best to take care of each other? Because when these climate disasters happen, we see how flawed these institutions are, right? And how much we cannot depend on them. And actually, for folks who lived in the margins of society, we know that they've also intentionally caused harm and destruction within our community. And queer and trans people of color know that well.
When is this going to stop? You know, when are we going to
realize that those have been lies for years and years in strapping us of imagining ourselves capable of doing things by our own? And that's something very positive. I think the hurricane exposed that.
I was able to experience different things that I didn't know I was able to do because I never did it, so I didn't do it. And then doing it, I was like, oh, I can do this. I'm good at it, actually.
Part of it too is creating glimpses into the world as it could be, as it should be, right? And so when people step into a space where healing is happening, and where people who historically not had access to those spaces to deal with the generational trauma that we carry, there's something very powerful that happens that it's hard to even describe, and we don't even have to describe it. Like, to put it into words actually would limit it. But when people step in and feel it, they smell it, they taste it, they experience it, it's powerful and it's transformative.
Todo el mundo aprendió a usar filtros, todo el mundo aprendió a usar sistema solar, todo el mundo, se abrió todo un mundo para gente que no sabía nada de esto y poder decir contra el sol. Tenemos sol, vamos a usarlo. Pues yo creo que mucha gente aprendió a comer y a sobrevivir de lo que había. Tú sabes, no quedaba de otra, aunque ya todo el mundo vuelve a su comfort zone y se le olvida, pero por lo menos algo queda.
Most of the time, it's only when disaster comes that we start to come together. And so I'm hoping that going forward, that these things also offer us insight about how we could actually be stronger and more effective and efficient and be conduits of change, some really profound change.
We need to organize under the assumption that shit is going down in terms of climate, in terms of politics, rather than just like disaster preparedness and like let's have water and food and things like this. Let's also have all the other systems that we're going to need. So let's have a medical system that works at a grassroots level. Let's have a food system that works at a grassroots level. Let's have an energy system that works at a grassroots level, like at the hyper local, so that when the larger structures fall as we want them to, we have those already set up.
It can be hard to have hope sometimes when you're so in, you know, like in a very stressed situation. Like sometimes like, okay, I'm doing this, what I care about, but is it actually helping? But then you see and meet people that you've never seen and you see all of these beautiful projects, like, okay, yes, we're not alone. Like these little small things, they're all connected in some way. And that gave me a lot of hope.
Most indigenous thought is that our mandate is to care for the planet. And that means paying attention. And so if you pay attention, there is resiliency.
Because at the core of resilience is our will to just keep living. We just want to live.
Well, I'm an extinct Indian. You know, seems pretty resilient of nature.
mostly with children. People sometimes see, oh, kids, they're so free and happy. Working with kids, I see mostly the anxiety. How are they gonna survive?
What does it mean to make people resilient in a system that's not working? The question to me is, what are we trying to be resilient towards?
So I think people know what needs to get done.
Liberation of our bodies and our ecosystems from extractive industries that do not support our well-being.
Luchar en contra de las medidas de austeridad y seguir visibilizando cómo todo esto nos oprime de diferentes maneras, en diferentes magnitudes.
Like basically a united front coalition, like multi-movement work, which includes people with disabilities.
Get to know the land again, because the land is the only thing that's going to save us in climate change, actually. How do we start to build mechanisms that combat climate change and also feed ourselves and also allow us to survive and heal and also heal with the land?
I think that it's important to not only look at things as fighting something, but also looking at what do we build. That a lot of that's going to require a large cultural shift, like for us to be able to imagine ourselves as agents of change, as people who can make a difference in the small and the large scale. And I think a lot about like who are the culture keepers that are going to inspire people to be more regenerative in the ways that we interact with the living world.
I do a lot of cultural work. And what does that have to do with climate change? It has to do a lot because this is the way we're supposed to behave. Just historically, for the most part, Two-Spirit were able to or asked to do certain things that benefited the tribe. Bless the pole for Sundance, or do this for our tribe, or bury the them for that tribe. Or to me, it's a term of ancient responsibilities. But I think everybody's, whether they're Two-Spirit or not, has ancient responsibilities.
It's a hard time to be alive, and it's an amazing time to be alive. While we're seeing a lot of really frightening things happening on an environmental level, on a political level, like also we're here because our ancestors did so much and they've survived incredible challenges to be here, to pass this life on to us.
There's a historical experience of queer and trans folks, and what I know personally as a trans person is like, we exist in those in-between spaces, you know? It's like, we're not scared of it, we're not afraid of it, you know? It's like, come in, sit down and have a cup of tea, welcome to our world, you know? Like, we've been sitting with knowing that how it's been isn't working. So what are we gonna do about it? Right? And it's scary sometimes to look into, like, I have no idea what's coming. I don't know how the world is going to meet me in the process of transition. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to lose our families? Are we going to lose our jobs? Are we going to lose our homes? But we know that we have to do it in order to honor our authenticity. And so I feel like if we look at that in a larger picture, like there's so much knowledge and experience to be uplifted from queer and trans people when it comes to this just transition process.
Yeah, I've been a rich man, and I've been a poor man, and I choose love, na 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 na, choose it every time. I choose love, na 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 na, choose it every time. I choose love, I choose it every time.
The protest began after nearly 900 violent, misogynistic, and homophobic text messages between the governor and other Puerto Rican government officials. Emails that disparaged the victims of Hurricane Maria.
A whole generation of young people now have a new sense of power, of the power that people can have to affect governance. And what happens next?
We have a lot of lessons to learn and really need to center the leadership of communities who have been through this. which is all around the world. Communities have been through this.
It's about understanding that we are entangled and that it's very complex, but we need to start having different conversations on how to address the powerful changes that need to happen for us to survive, for us to thrive as not only as a community, but as a people, as a species.
So I move through the seasons, my stands never change, and I'm holding a light, you know, the light of radiant love. The longest shouting, do you see me? 'Cause I know Creator does. Yeah, I can feel it in the love of this magnificent creation, and the patience it must have taken the place of stars. Yeah, I can see it, and the intelligence of giving plants the ability to transmute energy. Splitting atoms using photons. I look at my human family like, can we not be morons? 'Cause we're defacing sacred ground. I'm standing up a word, calling it rape now. Thinking somehow we could emulate the stars with the scars we call city lights. Thinking somehow we could emulate the stars with the scars we call city lights. I'm in the fight with this reasoning. I think global intelligence needs some seasoning. So I came here to wake 'em up, shake 'em up, pick 'em up, help 'em rise. Open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes. 'Cause I've been a rich man, and I've been a poor man, and I choose love, na 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 na, choose it every time. I choose love, na 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 na, choose it every time. I choose love, na na na, choose it every time.
Ooh, some bird of prey.
See, I wonder how we forgot to love the earth and the richness of her dirt. It seems like we got too busy looking up her.
Wow! That was so awesome to see all of these films together in conversation. Really an exciting moment for me. I'm sure all of you as well. We will be transitioning to the Q&A portion of the event now. And thank you to all of our lovely guests for being in conversation with us. And we'd like to start off by taking a moment for you all to introduce yourself and to share which film you were involved in. So I'd love it if, Trisha, we could start with you.
On the spot. So I'm Trisha Rainwater Tutwiler, and I created a quiche medicine tree for my installation with Sowing Agency. I am an indigiqueer multimedia artist. Mainly I work in self-portraiture. Yeah, that's a bit about me.
Thank you. We'll move to Sal and Nancy.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy.
My name is Sal, and we are part of Sunkiss Production. We're a queer, trans Asian film collective based in the Bay Area, specifically Ohlone territory, and we created Lipo and Sing with APICC.
Awesome. Bronte, let's move to you.
Hello, y'all. My name is Bronte. I was in the film Saratani. I'm the creative director for Led to Life. I'm calling in from Kashaya-Pomo territory. And I also serve as an educator for Nature Connection School, Weaving Earth. And
Thank you. Thank you. And Vanessa, why don't you close us out?
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Vanessa,
And I have the real pleasure of stewarding the Stories on the Fire and Flood film, which is now a part of my PhD in geography here at the University of Georgia on Muskogee Creek territory. So but a lot of my political education and a lot of the relationships that form the basis of this film were made out in Huichin. So it's really wonderful to be with you all today.
Thanks. And this is going to be our first question to all of you who would like to answer. One of the threads that we see between these films is a need for a radical transformation in our relationships to the land, as well as to one another, our relationships to power, our relationships to reclaiming tradition and ritual. So I'm wondering, what is the main type of relationship you are trying to explore or express through your film? And people can just share whenever they feel ready to respond.
I can go. I guess I shared a little that I struggled with my decision to make the work. I feel like it was like most of my art, a gift from my ancestors, and really like I feel like they're like the art directors in my art life. But I really am personally trying to heal my own relationship with my indigeneity. I think a lot of us, like queer folks, have been pushed out of ceremony at times due to like protocols with sweat and things like that, and then also our just the intergenerational trauma that lives within our families. It can be hard to come back to our families after coming out if you are pushed out, and just also unpacking your own feelings about your own trauma. And so I guess I'm really trying to, for myself, not for anyone else, but just like create pathways to healing on my own. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, I can go. I'm so happy to be here and so inspired to be in conversation with each of you and just noticing the threads between our projects. So I'm just holding that magic. And some of what I think that Saratni is up to, though I didn't direct that film, but more so what is happening in that in those ceremonies is rehistoricizing how we understand how especially I think Black folks are being impacted by state violence, and reweaving that state violence and environmental racism and trauma are all deeply interconnected with one another, that we need the land to support us, to heal, and they need us. And rerouting Black folks in connection to ecology and the lands that hold so many histories, that we can't actually do what a scholar, Black scholar Free Egunfemi calls commemorative justice. We can't do commemorative justice and like repair memory and heal without doing that with the land. Yeah, so I think that's what some of that project is hoping to honor that prayer.
Wow, Bronte. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll go. Bronte, I just want to say thank you for that term, commemorative justice. And I think I'm going to be sitting with that, because a lot of what Fire and Flood is doing is trying to give some commemorative justice to the simultaneous disasters in the fall of 2017, the Tubbs fire, in Northern California, which, you know, we can hardly remember anymore, but at that point in time, it was the worst fire that California had ever experienced. And every year since then, we've had the worst fire California's ever experienced. But that fire in 2017 happened at the same time as Hurricane Maria. So on one level, there's this space and time connection that's happening. And that is a relationship that I'm trying to show, because by looking at that relationship, what you see is a very similar history of colonization of first Spain and then the United States in both of these territories. And so Wildfire and Flood is trying to highlight the impacts of climate disasters on queer and trans communities. More importantly, it's trying to visibilize the roots of this issue by telling that 500-year story and the system of gendered racial capitalism that is creating both the climate crisis and our community's social vulnerability to those moments of crises. And the social vulnerability of all gender and sexually exuberant beings on the planet, both human and our more than human kin. So, I feel that this is a critical intervention into the mainstream LGBTQ movement that has such an assimilationist narrative entrenched in individualism and consumerism and nationalism, like the pink washing that we're seeing of Israeli apartheid right now. So I think that it's important that we have more queer and decolonial stories of climate change and resilience, in which resilience is not a bouncing back to the status quo, but as Loken said in that clip you saw, it's a bouncing towards the ancestral futures of collective social and ecological well-being. And as Bronte said, I see so many connections to the projects that you all are doing in that vision. And so I'm just very grateful to be in this space with you all.
Thank you. We grew up in a city called Vallejo, which is northern part of Ohlone territory. And growing up as Southeast Asian folks, and doing a project with our neighboring family, Khmer and Cambodian folks, there was so many similar themes and upbringings that I could relate to. For example, just living off of the land, living off as fisher people, and especially migrating as refugees or immigrants over into Ohlone territory, and trying to do the same practices is really hard when you don't understand the literal toxicity that happens into the water and how it's poisoning our bodies, but not knowing it because that's all we know how to survive. So doing this project was super, super a privilege. Growing up in the Bay Area, I didn't really understand what happened in the past. So in the 90s, there was a Chevron refinery that exploded. And that's what Lipo and Sang were affected by, where they had family members die at the age of 3 to all the way to 60. And it was just massive. So to hear like older, I think when I think of organizing, I always tend to think it's always like younger people, like queer people just making these movements, but it's so beautiful to see elder folks, intergenerational folks do that grassroots movement work and wanting to get involved and wanting to create a world where younger people like us don't have to breathe literal poison air, right? So these basic fundamentals, just bring it on a medium of film and crossing where we're able to produce that and film that. I think when we came on site into like where they're all like exercising and moving,
I know, that was so wholesome.
It was so wholesome, and just being able to like witness that. I didn't think we really fully understood what this project was about until we started to like take a moment, take a step, like move back and just really understand our relationship to the land, and really the understanding the importance of honoring the history that has happened, the violence that has happened, and how we decide to move forward with our work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Go for it, Lisa.
I appreciate that. So I have another question for everyone, and just thank you for watching these films together. It's nice seeing how these pull together. I'm curious, how are, for you as creators, in addition to like storytellers, how do you navigate the role of art making or creativity as a tool for social change?
I'll hop in the sauce. So good to hear all of you again. And I think about the ways that like myth was separated from ceremony and culture making and meaning making via colonization and white supremacy and patriarchy, etc. And the way that, yeah, getting to bring restore ritual storytelling feels like a kind of necessary way to make change, in that we make so much meaning about ourselves via the stories that, you know, are in our systems. And what happens when the way that art can shift our attention to redirect us toward other possibilities. Feels like the way that I'm thinking about how we make change, eco-social change through, yeah, art practice and ceremony as art practice.
Yeah, I think that my existence, my being is um is taking a stand, like moving into who I am. I'm an indigiqueer, mixed race, fat, queer person who makes art about her body. And that body is traumatized, that body is healing, that body is learning to trust. And so when I go into public spaces and I make art like APICC, there were a lot of white folks who were stopping and watching. And I didn't realize how much that would kind of like mess with my body and my sense of like of safety. And I think that there's a way that like our trauma, like intergenerational trauma and the effects of it live in our bodies still. And so moving into ceremony and creating our own safety in it, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's really important. And it's kind of, it becomes a mirror for others.
I love how both of your answers speak to something much deeper and more personal than like what we kind of associate with like social change or activism kind of like on a surface level. And I really appreciate that, the adding the complexity to this.
Okay, all right. Not stepping on your toes, am I? Okay. So I'm a little newer to this, and I still feel like an imposter when I call myself a filmmaker, especially because Fire and Flood isn't done yet. It will be. There will be an end. But I think that there are a couple things I wanted to say, which is, you know, one, I've just really been seeking my role in the movement and trying to get in where I fit in. And as a chronic academic, the realm of cultural and consciousness organizing feels like a great fit, especially during the pandemic. I have taught with film so much. And I think of, instead of infusing my classes with just lecturing in front of my students, can I introduce them to all of these people and share these stories? And so that's how I kind of came to storytelling and filmmaking, was through academia. And as part of that, I also want to share a little bit about, you know, as a white settler filmmaker making a film that really centers Two-Spirit and queer and trans people of color, that comes with, it really requires a clear compass in representational justice. And I'm trying very hard to find that. And so a big part of my PhD is even beyond like the climate change and queerness is really thinking about that and what does it mean to have representational justice with these stories. And so one answer I've come to is that in addition to the ideological work of cultural change and of filmmaking, I've also committed to materially supporting all of the people who have shared their stories in the film. So 50% of everything I've ever raised to produce this project has gone to mutual aid for the people in the film themselves. And so, you know, that's something that your question brought up for me. It's one way that I'm attempting to navigate a lot of these ongoing contradictions of living in the wound of settler colonialism and engaging in cultural activism while doing what I can to provide material support to queer resilience on the ground.
When I first got into filmmaking, I got in where I was like, I'm so tired of white folks making film that wasn't representational of like the bodies and the communities that I grew up in, specifically a lot of like queer, trans, Asian representation. And I think I got in doing like, okay, I want to reclaim our stories and really create like what it means to move in the world. And as a Virgo sun and like super workaholic, I felt like, and trying to survive in the Bay Area is really, really hard as an artist. And when the pandemic hit, that is when I had to really reshift how I move through art. And now when all of my clients were stripped away, that forced me to think about like, why am I doing film? And also like, what is going to bring me joy? And like, and like, even so, like, I've just been in a really weird stage where film has felt like work as in like a chore. And I realized I've been really misaligned with my body as a trans person. So I think when we talk about how do we navigate film for social change, I really do think it does start with ourselves, right? Feeling aligned with ourselves, being able to trust our intuition, especially when trauma clouds that. So I think being able to start with the self, leading with joy, and allowing that artwork to kind of speak for itself in that way. And I just want to say to all the filmmakers here, like, watching y'all's film has reminded me again of why I love film so much. So this is really meaningful for me because I think I produced this, we produced Lipo and Saying 2018, and my relationship with film has just changed tremendously. So just to be able to witness these stories, I'm like, holy fuck, this is exactly why I do the work that I do. So thank you. Did you want to say anything?
Oh no, you said it.
Okay.
I'm just
Lisa, how do you want to move to the next questions?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Well, first off, thank you for these answers. I think there's there's just so much juicy things in everything you're saying, and I love the way it's like makes me rethink how we frame and talk about so many of these things. For you in the audience, you're also welcome to drop your questions in, so you can just drop it into the chat, and perhaps I can ask, we had a question in mind about community care, and perhaps I can ask that while we're waiting for more questions from the audience. How does that sound, Turner?
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you for witnessing our transparent facilitation. So community care is also a common theme that is showing up in so many of your films. And so I was curious if you can tell us more about how that showed up for you in the film. And I think also in what you're working on now. Thank you.
I can hop in first on this one because the solutions offered in fire and flood are all based in community care, which is something I so rarely see in climate change documentaries. It tends to be something about CO2 in the atmosphere and something you can do with your legislators to call them and that'll change something. But really what fire and flood is highlighting is the mutual aid work that people engaged in after the disasters and continue to do. So, queer and trans folks in Sonoma County creating spaces of safety and joy for each other in the shelters, which are really oppressive spaces. Fondo de Resiliencia, rebuilding farmers' homes in rural Puerto Rico, providing Reiki and acupuncture to the farmers, feeding all their brigade volunteers organic, locally grown meals throughout their service trips. North Bay Organizing Project worked with Healing Clinic Collective and Ancestral Apothecary to create free, bilingual, and accessible traditional healing clinics for the Latinx community of Sonoma County. Just so many. One more I really want to share. After the Kincaid fire, the Disability Culture Club's Power to Live campaign, charging folks as respirators, mobility aids, and refrigerated medications while protesting the privatized energy utility, PG&E. Really grateful for the work of Stacy Milburn. May they rest in peace. So I think that all of these, what they highlight is, while they're wildly different examples and they're not at the kind of structural global level that we've been taught to imagine climate change solutions need to be, what they do show is how these practices, they build a new embodied knowledge of queer ecological futures. How do we enact and live that future now, reconnecting land, body, mind, spirit, and community together so that, we're exerting power not only at a material level, but at an ideological level. We're stepping into that space where we want to go, and we're building it as we're visioning it together. And that work of reimagining and practicing regenerative relationships, I think it starts in the hyper local of the relationships themselves that emerge out of community care. So I was really happy to see that as a common theme because it's something I've been sitting with a lot, as obviously you all are as well.
Vanessa. I am thinking about this book that I love so much called The Sovereignty of Quiet, Beyond Resistance in Black Culture. Lisa, I see a reaction. Do you know Kevin Kwashi, or you love that book?
Yeah, so a few of us went to Smith and
Yay! Okay, so a professor.
Yes.
Okay, I love that text so much, of course. And I'm thinking about how in that text, there's something Kevin Kwashi is really like thinking about affording Black people their interiority and their own and their sovereignty of their prayer and their self, their real true like spirit and soul. And I think some of what led to Life's work is, do y'all hear this airplane?
It's not super loud actually, at least for me.
Okay, I hear Thich Nhat Hanh says to use this moment as a mindfulness bell, so I'm just pause for 2 seconds.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking about, I've been in Led to Life's practice really thinking about how we can refuse needing to get our power from the state and from that our power is somewhere out there that these people have for us. And there's all of these things we have to do to go get it. And there are real things that, there are real reparations and there are real things that can be changed. But there's also, like I see in so many of these projects, what happens when we come together among ourselves to care for one another. And I've been really looking back at Black feminists who I really love's work, who made their work was seen as a project of resistance when really it was a project about caring for people and like really just loving people and making sure people were had psychic freedom. And so I think some of what led to Life's practices, especially in recuperating Black prophetic traditions, is like, how do we just create space as though our freedom is already here? And how is that a practice in care? Because I think there's something about getting to really be tender with people's dreams, and our dream space is so important for the land, because the land needs our dreams. And we need the land to be doing that dreaming, and also to really be like, we have to care for the land. We have to care for our mother. Yeah, our mother. I say that as a queer, our queer mother. I'm not saying that the earth is, I'm gonna stop now because I'm trailing away and I'm outside with the mother. I'm gonna pass it back to the center.
For me, we grew up in a really big family. We grew up in a family of 7. And I think at an early age, I just really was exposed to just having my different siblings just help me with a lot of other things. So when Sal and I were working on this film together, just to see like, oh, this community reminds me of my family, and I felt really seen, and I felt really, like, representation is so important, like similar to what you said earlier. And I think it's so nice to see it being have a space where it's accessible to teach other folks that don't know that these spaces exist. And it just reminds me of the saying of like, if the space isn't there for you, you create it with your community. And I think that was really beautiful. And I saw that really, blossom within the film. And when we were just talking to everyone, it was just beautiful just to see that happen organically. So yeah.
And one thing I wanted to add about when I think about community care, I think about accountability a lot, I feel like in the pandemic, I kept seeing a lot of things around like cancel culture and all of these things. And that's super real. And I think it's just like this, I notice a theme of like violence and cycles of violence happening and hurting people. And I think when I think about community care, I think about like, how do we build a community of safety and a community of trust that where if we do fuck up, like we can be held with compassion and tender, because these conditionings of capitalism, neoliberalism, all of these things that we have to unlearn, there's going to be fuck up along the way when it's rooted in us. But, when it's like when we're breathing the air, drinking the water, all of that. So in the process of like, community care, I think about like accountability, compassion, feeling seen, and creating that safety collective in a collective sense.
I think something that comes to mind when I think about community care is my resistance to community care, and how I'm totally a loner for sure. And I think trauma made me that way. And so inching my way back into like saying I need help or support has been something that's been really difficult for me, but like a good bit of learning. But I guess something I was thinking about was how the prayer ties I used in the video, the film, were made by other people. I created a small pile that was my own healing work I was doing, but then I was really entrusted with other people's prayers and intentions, and they were in boxes for years. I was like, oh my gosh, I made these and I asked for these. Now what am I going to do with them? And I think being in the park with the trees around and just feeling very grounded and connected to my ancestors and their vision, I guess that felt like community care coming back to me, and my community caring for me in that moment, even though I felt afraid and like I wasn't sure what I was doing. But it really, I feel like, shines through in the video.
Thank you for all those brilliant answers. I feel like I keep thinking about the time and like, oh, I wish there was more time, because there's just so many layers to what everyone is saying. Like one thing I've been thinking about when people are talking about community care and accountability, and like maybe some people want more or less space from that community, is like I've been a student of transformative justice for years. Certainly not an expert, but I try to do that work and learning. And I'm just thinking about how like that approach to community healing and care, and our community holding us and challenging us in the ways that we need is so important, right? So it's just one of the many thoughts that are floating around in my head right now. But just to be mindful of time, I know that it's limited and I wish I could keep going, but to close us out, I'd love to hear what your current or upcoming projects that you're working on, or where people can follow you so they could learn more and stay connected.
I could go. We could go. So during the pandemic, we were, I think, when I think about joy, I think about my mother's food. And we started a project called Lost in the Fish Sauce, where we talk about a theme, certain like stillness, and transform it into a meal. So yeah, it's kind of like a cooking show with like queer content, and that's what the work that we're doing as of right now, but no other like film projects, just because I'm trying to be patient with myself and not like have to rush certain things. And also like letting go of perfectionism, because Virgo and stuff. So.
Right. So food is a good place to start.
I know y'all have things going on, so want to hear about them.
I am always working on my self-portraiture. I want to create this large archive of my life. And then I'm also starting work on a project. I've had a few photos I've done of Indigenous queers in San Francisco in the Bay Area, really also wanting to create an archive of who is here, and really just like having that marker. So you can find me, I will put it in the chat so you can find it there.
I'll say that the Fire and Flood's it's the biggest project I'm working on right now. And it's, I just graduated from my 21st grade of school, and it's finally the last of my coursework. So I'm now officially on dissertation time. And my plan is to finish the film and then start audiencing it and interviewing people and holding community discussions to better understand how other people's stories intersect with the stories in the film. So that's what I'm planning and intending right now. And so if that's something you're excited about, I'd also love to collaborate with that, because I do hope that some of those screenings can be the kind of beautiful prefigurative space that Led to Life, creates through ritual, so that, we're coming together to imagine, and to not just imagine, but to embody and be in those kinds of places where we want to be moving towards as a global community. So I'd love to build new and tend new relationships towards those visions.
I'm so excited to follow you guys after this and keep looking at your work. Glad we got to meet each other virtually. Well, Vanessa, I actually know you, but hello again. I am so excited. We have a new film coming out, Led to Life, that we produced this time. That film was directed by friend Fraser Jones, but we weren't really thinking about the film while we were doing the ceremony. And this time we were really, when we were designing the ceremony, I was really thinking about the film. And so it really shows, I hope you get to see it. It shows like, it'll be very different from what you just saw. And it's like really the vibe of the work. You really feel the vibe of the work. And it's called Between Starshine and Clay. And it looks at a ceremony we hosted in 2019 in Chichenyo Ohlone territory in Oakland, in collaboration with Anti-Police Terror Project. And Led to Life is where we got some ceremonies coming up in West Oakland and in Puerto Rico. Yeah, a summer program with the school I teach with, Weaving Earth, that's online. So I'll put all of those things in the chat. It's about bird language and prophecy and all the good things and yada, 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 connecting with the land. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all. This is really beautiful. And I'm excited to follow along with all of these things that you're doing after this.
I guess I'll come on to close the event, but thank you all for coming. And I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. If you are in the area, please go visit the last hour, I would say, of the show at SoMa Arts Cultural Center on Yalamu, San Francisco. So yes, please go check that out. The virtual gallery is also up on the SoMa Arts website. And some of the artists are also selling their work on AAWAA's website. I dropped all of those links into our chat, but yeah, please spread the word about the show that happened this month and all of the artists that you heard from today. Thank you so much. Yeah. Have a good week. Enjoy the sun.